I started off, I was in forestry and wildlife and going to be a, naturalist somehow. I ended up selling drugs for a living. But I was vice president of the Student Government Association in my final year in school and got into the politics of things. And so I was doing a lot of speaking, and I could speak anyway. I just had the gift. But the effort of combining my biology degree with my social experience worked really well in sales. And it was a fit. It was a real natural fit. Never would have thought, going into Stevens Point that I would come out working for the pharmaceutical industry. I had no idea. That's how life is, isn't it? I worked very closely with Bob Ingram when he was CEO at Glaxo, both in the sales capacity as well as on the project where I was a national speaker for the industry. I stayed for 28 years.
Mike Pucci is one of the most authentic people, leaders that I've ever had the privilege to know and work with. Mike was one of our sales leaders, and in pharmaceuticals, you sell medicine not directly to the end user, who is the patient we all exist to serve, but rather through the healthcare professional. And I saw very quickly in Mike that absolute integrity to carry out that mission. And he also had the ability to attract talent, people who wanted to work with him and for him. And he did so because he cared about people.
I was always a student of watching people's styles and leadership and the way that they interacted with people and what was effective and what wasn't. Stevens Point, during our time, had two very polar, different personalities of chancellors. When we got there, it was Lee Sherman Dreyfus, who was a character, a great speaker, charismatic, a great advocate for the university. Phil Marshall, on the flip side, was more introspective, very concerned with bringing people in and getting input from the faculty and from the staff before making decisions. And I certainly, in school, watched those two men and how they led. Jack Oster was probably my favorite professor at UW Stevens Point. He taught Russian foreign policy. Now, this is back in the post-Jimmy Carter era and right as Ronald Reagan came into the presidency, right in that time. And obviously Russia was still an enemy, and he taught how to deal with the Russians. I just felt like I was living in history. I think I moved up through the company because I was able to see the talent and get the right people in the right jobs and be successful through them. And because they were successful, that made me successful.
And later, Mike, after a distinguished career in the sales leadership team, I asked him to take on a role as an industry spokesman. And Mike was able to put together a whole effort called The Value of Medicines, which I think did a real service, not only for our industry, but for our stakeholders.
Now I live in beautiful Lake Gaston on the North Carolina-Virginia border. It's on a reservoir that is the Roanoke River. Beautiful, beautiful area. All of a sudden, I go to one of the social engagements and they've got a speaker, and he's got a presentation on uranium mining that is proposed to happen potentially on the Roanoke River. And his presentation was a model of what could happen in the event of a hurricane or a heavy rainfall, on how the sediment from the mining operation would end up putting radioactive material into the river. I'm appalled. Now, I had water resource management. I have a natural resource management degree from Stevens Point, and I understand what radioactive contamination of the waterway is going to do to our life. And I'm like John Brown at Harper's Ferry. I was like, no, this is not going to happen. We got to stop this. So the guy from Stevens Point is the man of the hour to take this on and bring science to the table. We went from winning the battle for uranium mining prevention to fighting the largest utility to get Duke Energy to clean up all their coal ash sites, which happen to be somehow always located around water. It's a selling job to explain why you're trying to do what you're doing. And then all that came from Stevens Point and the great teachers that were there and the great examples we saw from our leadership. I can't tell you how much I've gotten from that education. It was a great school, great experience, and I've used every ounce of what I learned there at Point.